The 1,950 seconds were supposed to be the age of optimism, new cars, white picket fences, and television families that never argued. But in the theaters, something else was brewing. Sci-fi films of the era weren't just pulp entertainment. They were warnings, blueprints, and sometimes eerie prophecies. While critics once dismissed them as B-movie nonsense, many of these films nailed the future with unnerving accuracy. Which one saw it coming before the rest of us did? Let's dive into the forgotten prophecies of the atomic age. Destination Moon 1950. Before NASA even existed, Hollywood dared to imagine the impossible. Destination Moon wasn't about rubber monsters or death rays, it was about math, mechanics, and the raw courage of leaving Earth behind. Released in 1950, George Pal's film took rocketry seriously, down to weight calculations, fuel consumption, and the barren silence of the lunar surface. Audiences expecting aliens got something scarier: realism. The film follows a group of scientists and businessmen who fund the first human trip to the moon. No military secret, no evil empire, just the idea that the United States had to reach space first. Sound familiar? Nearly 20 years later, the real Apollo astronauts would repeat that mission almost beat for beat. Even the film's lunar lander, spindly and fragile, looks eerily like NASA's actual design. What made the movie revolutionary wasn't its spectacle, but its sincerity. It featured animated segments explaining rocket science, brought in technical advisors to ensure accuracy, and treated audiences as thinkers, not thrill seekers. In the final moments, when the astronauts risk everything to lift off from the moon's surface, there's no villain to defeat, just physics. Critics laughed at its earnestness back then, but history proved the film right. Destination Moon predicted the technology, the politics, and even the national pride that would define the space race. In hindsight, it wasn't science fiction at all, it was a preview. The Day the Earth Stood Still 1951. Picture this. A flying saucer lands on the White House lawn, and out steps a visitor who looks almost human but carries a message sharper than any blade. That was The Day the Earth Stood Still. Released in 1951, during the height of Cold War panic, the film didn't come to scare you with aliens, it came to scare you with yourself. Klaatu, played with unnerving calm, doesn't threaten Earth with conquest. He warns us. Humanity's new obsession with atomic energy, if left unchecked, could ripple beyond Earth and endanger the galaxy. His companion, Gort, a towering robot, doesn't fire unless provoked, a quiet but clear metaphor for automated power. Decades later, when debates over artificial intelligence and autonomous defense systems dominate headlines, the film feels chillingly current. But the brilliance of this movie wasn't just the warning, it was the way it held up a mirror. Instead of showing aliens as monsters, it showed humans as short-sighted, suspicious, and violent. The most advanced species in the universe wasn't coming to enslave us, they were coming to tell us to grow up. With Bernard Herrmann's eerie electronic score and a tone that was quiet rather than bombastic, The Day the Earth Stood still predicted the coming global conversations about peace, technology, and responsibility. It asked the question still relevant today: if a voice of reason landed in front of us, would we listen or pull the trigger? When Worlds Collide 1951. Not every sci-fi prophecy was about rockets and robots. When Worlds Collide tackled something bigger, the end of Earth itself. Released in 1951, the film imagined a rogue star hurtling toward our planet. Scientists plead for action while politicians stall and ordinary people panic. In other words, it played out exactly like every global crisis since. The story follows the desperate effort to build an Ark ship that will carry a chosen few to a habitable planet before Earth's inevitable destruction. The special effects, groundbreaking for their time, showed cities crumbling, oceans boiling, and fire consuming the globe. But the real punch wasn't the visuals, it was the moral question humming beneath them. Who gets saved? Who decides? Is it the wealthy, the skilled, or simply the lucky? The echoes to modern times are uncanny. Whether it's climate change, asteroid defense, or colonizing Mars, the questions remain the same. What happens when survival isn't for everyone? Who gets a seat on the lifeboat? When Worlds Collide earned its place as one of the earliest doomsday films that actually took the science seriously. Decades later, scientists really are mapping asteroid paths and drawing up contingency plans. Hollywood asked the question first. Reality is still trying to catch up. The Thing from Another World, 1951. Buried in Arctic ice, something alien stirs. That was the haunting setup for The Thing from Another World, one of the earliest and most influential entries in the 1952nd sci-fi boom. Unlike the flashy city-destroying epics of the era, this one kept its story tight and terrifying, locking its suspense inside a remote research outpost. There, a team of scientists and Air Force personnel stumbled upon a frozen figure preserved in a block of ice. At first, it looked like a miracle discovery, a chance to study life from another world. But once the ice thawed, curiosity gave way to horror. What emerged wasn't a ray-gun-wielding invader, but a plant-like organism with a hunger that defied understanding. And with that, paranoia set in. This wasn't just a monster movie, it was a thought experiment disguised as pulp entertainment. The film predicted two very real concerns decades ahead of schedule: the dangers of isolated scientific outposts and the possibility of alien microbes contaminating Earth. Sound familiar? Today, both NASA and the European Space Agency enforce planetary protection protocols, ensuring anything we bring back from Mars, Europa, or beyond won't unleash biological chaos on Earth. Yet, the genius of The Thing from Another World wasn't its creature, it was the argument at its center. Do we study the unknown, risking everything in the name of science? Or do we destroy it before it destroys us? That moral tug-of-war still echoes today in debates about artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and other technologies we barely control. Shot with overlapping dialogue, tense pacing, and shadow-drenched hallways, the film felt startlingly modern. Its famous last line, "Keep watching the skies," became both a warning and a prophecy. And in the 21st century, with telescopes scanning for asteroids and satellites tracking UFOs, we're still doing exactly that. It came from outer space 1953. While most 1952nd sci-fi films screamed, "The aliens are coming to get us," It Came from Outer Space whispered something radical. Maybe they're not here to harm us at all. Released in 1953 and based on a treatment by Ray Bradbury, the film dared to challenge the paranoia of its era. Instead of invaders raining destruction, it gave us stranded travelers just trying to survive. The setup was simple but brilliant. Aliens crash land in the Arizona desert, forced to take human form while repairing their damaged ship. To the locals, though, their caution looks like infiltration. Suspicion builds, fear spreads, and before long, the humans are convinced an invasion is underway. What made the film so striking was its inversion of the genre's usual formula. This wasn't a battle for Earth, it was a case study in misunderstanding. The aliens had no plans for conquest. They wanted nothing more than to go home. But humanity's instinct to assume the worst nearly doomed both sides. That central idea, that the unknown isn't automatically hostile, was light years ahead of its time, especially in a decade where suspicion and conformity ruled public life. Even today, scientists and thinkers debate how humanity should respond if we ever pick up a genuine extraterrestrial signal. Do we welcome it with optimism or steel ourselves for danger? The film's answer leaned toward empathy before paranoia, a lesson that feels even more relevant in our fractured, fearful world. Visually, the movie also stood out. Shot in early 3D and set against sweeping desert backdrops, it had a shimmering, dreamlike quality. The alien forms, glimpsed as formless shapes through layers of distortion, unsettled without ever turning grotesque. In the end, It Came from Outer Space flipped the sci-fi script. Instead of monsters, it gave us mirrors. And in doing so, it predicted a future where first contact might not test our strength, but our humanity. War of the Worlds, 1953. A meteor crashes into a quiet field. People gather, curious, until the rock opens and reveals something far worse. War of the Worlds wasn't just spectacle, it was a warning. Released in 1953 and based on H.G. Wells' classic novel, the film put Cold War fears into Technicolor flames. The Martians weren't little green men. They were relentless machines gliding across landscapes, vaporizing cities, and leaving nothing but ash. The heat ray sound effect alone became legend, an eerie hum that still raises hairs. Watching Los Angeles crumble in fiery explosions was both thrilling and terrifying in an era where nuclear dread loomed large. But what made the film prophetic was its ending. Humanity throws everything at the invaders: tanks, planes, bombs, and nothing works. Salvation comes not from technology, but from biology. The Martians fall to germs invisible to the human eye. That twist reminded audiences that nature itself can be more powerful than any invention. Think about how viruses today have humbled the entire globe. Suddenly, the ending feels less like fiction and more like a grim reminder. Produced by George Pal with dazzling effects for the time, War of the Worlds captured both awe and helplessness. It warned us that no matter how advanced we think we are, survival often depends on the smallest, most overlooked forces around us. Them. 1954. It starts with a child wandering through the New Mexico desert, clutching a broken doll. No words, no screams, just silence and fear etched on her face. That chilling opening set the tone for Them, a film that didn't just dabble in atomic age paranoia, it defined it. Released in 1954, Them wasn't the first creature feature of the decade, but it was the first to get everything right. At first, the movie plays like a detective story. Authorities investigate a string of bizarre disappearances, shredded vehicles, and whispers of something huge moving across the sands. The truth, when it arrives, is shocking. Giant ants, mutated by nuclear testing, nesting beneath the desert floor. When the creatures finally appear, towering, shrieking, and swarming, it's a gut punch, both thrilling and horrifying. But Them wasn't just about oversized insects. It was about consequence. Atomic testing was still new in the 1950 seconds, and the world had little understanding of its long-term effects. The ants became a metaphor for the dangers of tampering with forces beyond our control, mutations, fallout, and unintended ripple effects we couldn't predict. By grounding its story in science and playing it completely straight, the film turned pulp into prophecy. Shot in stark black and white, with performances delivered in absolute seriousness, Them carried weight. The scientists weren't mad geniuses, and the military wasn't comic relief. These were professionals grappling with a nightmare their own era had unleashed. In that sense, the ants weren't monsters, they were consequences. The film ends with a warning that still resonates. When man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world, and we may never close it again. Today, with climate change, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence pushing into unknown territory, Them feels less like fiction and more like a cautionary tale still unfolding. This Island Earth 1955. A strange package arrives in the mail. Inside are parts that no existing system on Earth could explain. Assemble them, and suddenly you're staring at a screen that connects you to another world. That was the unforgettable hook of This Island Earth, one of the boldest sci-fi films of the 1950 seconds. Released in 1955, the film followed Dr. Cal Meacham, a brilliant scientist who finds himself drawn into a mysterious program run by strangers with oddly formal manners and strange foreheads. Soon, the truth becomes clear. They aren't human at all. They're emissaries from Metaluna, a distant planet locked in a desperate war and on the brink of destruction. Instead of arriving with fleets to conquer Earth, the Metalunans arrive with outstretched hands, recruiting Earth's best minds to save their dying world. On the surface, the movie dazzled audiences with its bold visuals, glowing laboratories, futuristic consoles, surreal alien landscapes, and the unforgettable Metaluna mutant with its bulging head and insect-like features. But beneath the spectacle was a surprising prophecy. Maybe first contact with an advanced civilization wouldn't come in the form of domination. Maybe it would come in the form of a plea. In hindsight, the story feels eerily like a metaphor for scientific collaboration across borders. Think about today's global partnerships on projects like the James Webb Space Telescope, the Large Hadron Collider, or the fight against climate change. Each represents the very idea this island Earth dared to suggest, that survival may depend on sharing knowledge, even across boundaries we once thought uncrossable. Critics at the time dismissed it as flashy space opera, but the deeper question still lingers. Can intelligence endure if it operates without empathy? For a film made in 1955, that's a message that feels startlingly modern, even visionary. Forbidden Planet 1956. Shakespeare in space, that's the best way to describe Forbidden Planet. Released in 1956, it broke the mold of mid-century sci-fi by fusing high art with futuristic spectacle. Gone were the rubber suits, recycled sets, and dime store monsters. Instead, audiences were treated to a story about ambition, hubris, and the darkest corners of the human mind. The film follows Commander Adams and his crew as they land on Altair 4 to investigate a vanished colony. What they find is Dr. Morbius and his daughter, Altaira, the sole survivors. Morbius, through years of isolation, has tapped into the technology of the Krell, an extinct alien race so advanced they seemed almost godlike. He harnesses their vast knowledge, but in doing so awakens something terrifying. His subconscious fears, magnified by the alien machinery, manifest into an invisible monster that stalks and kills. The great twist? The monster isn't alien at all. It's Morbius. That central idea, that technology can amplify human flaws, was years ahead of its time. Think about the way artificial intelligence today can mirror our worst biases, or how social media algorithms amplify rage instead of reason. Forbidden Planet suggested that progress isn't always progress if our emotions and ethics don't keep pace. Visually, the movie was just as groundbreaking. Shot in lush CinemaScope, it featured vast alien landscapes, sleek, futuristic designs, and one of cinema's first true robot stars, Robbie the Robot, who became a cultural icon overnight. The film's influence is enormous. You can trace its DNA directly to Star Trek, 2001, A Space Odyssey, and countless space epics. But its real legacy lies in its warning: what happens when our intelligence outpaces our wisdom? Forbidden Planet dared to ask, and decades later, the question still hangs in the air, unanswered: invasion of the body. Snatchers 1956. You go to bed, and the next morning your neighbor looks the same, talks the same, but something is missing. No spark, no soul. That was the nightmare-fueling Invasion of the Body Snatchers, released in 1956. Unlike the pulpy alien spectacles of its time, this film didn't rely on spaceships, ray guns, or giant monsters. Its terror was far more intimate: the loss of identity, the hollowing out of humanity itself. Set in the quiet California town of Santa Mira, the story follows Dr. Miles Bennell, who begins noticing something deeply wrong with his patients and neighbors. People insist their loved ones aren't the same. They look identical, they sound familiar, but something in their essence has vanished. Slowly, Bennell uncovers the chilling truth. Alien pods are duplicating human beings while they sleep, leaving behind emotionless replicas. The horror comes not from spectacle, but from silence. Imagine realizing the people you trust most, your family, your friends, your spouse, are no longer themselves. It's a concept that gets under the skin because it plays on one of our deepest fears: being surrounded by the familiar and realizing it's all an imitation. Interpretations of the film have shifted over the decades. Some saw it as a critique of McCarthy-era paranoia, others as a warning about blind conformity in post-war America. But strip away the politics, and the core fear remains timeless: losing individuality in a world that demands sameness. Kevin McCarthy's frantic final scene, running down a highway screaming, "They're here already, you're next," still chills almost 70 years later. In today's digital age, where algorithms predict our behavior and online personas blur reality, the story feels eerily prophetic. Invasion of the Body Snatchers wasn't just a 1,950-second sci-fi thriller, it became the blueprint for paranoia cinema and a prophecy that hasn't stopped echoing through time. The Incredible Shrinking Man, 1957. Some sci-fi films looked outward to stars and galaxies. The Incredible Shrinking Man looked inward, literally. Released in 1957, it told the story of Scott Carey, an ordinary man exposed to a strange radioactive mist. Slowly, his body begins to shrink. At first, it's a medical oddity. Soon, it's a nightmare. A house cat becomes a predator. A thread spool becomes a shelter. A dripping faucet is a waterfall of doom. What made the film so groundbreaking was its refusal to settle for cheap spectacle. Sure, the oversized sets and clever effects wowed audiences, but the real impact was emotional. Scott's marriage crumbles, his pride collapses, and his very sense of self disintegrates as he gets smaller. In the end, he shrinks beyond visibility, entering the subatomic realm. Instead of despairing, he finds meaning in infinity. That final monologue still resonates. Existence continues, no matter how small. In a way, the film predicted the coming fascination with quantum physics, nanotechnology, and the idea that entire universes exist within the tiniest particles. In 1957, that was pure fantasy. Today, it sounds like science headlines. The brilliance of The Incredible Shrinking Man is how it used one man's bizarre fate as a metaphor for the human condition. It wasn't just about size, it was about identity, dignity, and survival in a world that no longer fit. Nearly 70 years later, its mix of terror and philosophy still feels enormous. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1954. Jules Verne dreamed it in the 19th century, but Disney's lavish 1954 adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea turned that dream into prophecy. At its heart was Captain Nemo's Nautilus, a submarine unlike anything the world had seen on screen. Sleek, futuristic, and powered not by coal or steam, but by a mysterious atomic-like energy source, it was a vision decades ahead of its time. Just months later, life caught up with fiction when the U.S. Navy launched the USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. Sometimes science fiction doesn't just predict the future, it pushes it forward. The film followed Professor Aronnax, harpooner Ned Land, and the enigmatic Nemo as they journeyed into the ocean's depths in a machine that blurred the line between ship and sanctuary. The underwater photography was groundbreaking, capturing divers swimming alongside schools of fish in technicolor wonder. The epic battle with the giant squid became one of the most iconic action sequences of the decade. And at the center of it all was James Mason's unforgettable portrayal of Captain Nemo, a brilliant, tortured anti-hero who used technology not to conquer, but to escape a world he despised. Yet, beyond the spectacle, the film carried a sobering message. Nemo had freed himself from empires, wars, and politics, but he could not free himself from his own conscience. His submarine was both liberation and prison, a technological marvel that also revealed the limits of human isolation. Looking back, what's most striking is how the Nautilus anticipated today's nuclear-powered submarines, deep-sea research vehicles, and even the modern dream of living off-grid with self-sustaining technology. Its design, philosophy, and sheer ambition pointed directly toward the world we live in now. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea wasn't just a Disney spectacle, it was a cinematic prophecy, showing that the mysteries below the waves were every bit as vast and inspiring as the stars above. X-M, 1950. While Destination Moon imagined a technical, optimistic path to the stars, Rocketship X-M chose a far darker route. Released in 1950, it told the story of a crew attempting humanity's first lunar mission. But instead of reaching the moon, their spacecraft veers off course and crash lands on Mars. What they discover there isn't wonder, it's warning. Mars is not home to thriving alien civilizations or fantastical cities. Instead, it is a devastated wasteland scarred by the aftermath of atomic war. The production itself was rushed, hastily made to beat Destination Moon into theaters. The budget was thin, the sets were cheap, and much of the space footage was recycled stock. Yet despite the rough edges, the film's ideas were startlingly bold. It introduced audiences to the idea of nuclear self-destruction on a planetary scale. The Martian ruins were a mirror held up to humanity, showing what could happen if we let our own technology run unchecked. In hindsight, the movie feels eerily prophetic. Today, scientists study dry riverbeds, ancient ocean basins, and the thin Martian atmosphere, piecing together evidence that Mars may once have been alive with water and possibly with life. The film's vision of a once thriving world, now barren and poisoned, wasn't too far from what researchers are actually uncovering. What lingers about Rocketship X-M isn't its production value or melodramatic dialogue, it's its philosophy. It dared to ask whether civilizations inevitably destroy themselves with the very inventions that once empowered them. Do advanced species reach a point where progress and destruction become the same path? That was a chilling question in 1950, when nuclear weapons were brand new, and it remains just as relevant in 2025 as technology races ahead faster than our wisdom. Rocketship X-M may have been rushed pulp, but its message lingers like a warning from Mars itself. GOG 1954. In the age of atomic paranoia, GOG brought the fear closer to home. Released in 1954, the film centered on a secret underground laboratory filled with experimental technology, solar power, cryogenics, and computer-controlled defense systems. At the heart of it all were two robots, Gog and Magog, programmed to assist scientists, but capable of being turned against them. Decades before DARPA, smart weapons, or debates about artificial intelligence, Gog was already raising the alarm. What happens when machines built to serve us start making decisions faster and colder than humans? The film framed its story as a mystery thriller, with strange accidents plaguing the lab. Was it sabotage, or were the machines simply beyond control? The visuals may look quaint today, with blocky robots and humming consoles, but the ideas were razor-sharp. Automation, remote surveillance, and the blurring line between human command and machine execution, those were science fiction in 1954. Now they're the evening news. What makes GOG prophetic is how close it came to reality. From autonomous drones to AI-driven labs, the film's vision of technology running ahead of human oversight feels uncomfortably accurate. In its own pulpy way, GOG predicted not just the tools of the future, but the ethical debates we're still having. So there you have it. 15 sci-fi visions from the 1,950 seconds that turned out to be far more than Saturday matinee thrills. They were roadmaps, warnings, and sometimes downright prophecies. From space travel to artificial intelligence, these so-called B-movies saw the future long before the experts did. Which one of these films do you think nailed it best? Drop your pick in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep-cut movie history, and keep watching the skies just in case.